So, welcome to this edition of the Caffeine Chronicles. My guest today, with over 50 books to his name, is Gary Vasey, aka G. Michael Vasey, and he's an established author who's made his name within subjects such as the paranormal, metaphysics, magic, poetry, and even business. And he writes about everything from earth magic to social issues on his magical world of Michael Vasey Substack. And he also runs the Earth Magic Bruno YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe. The link is in the description. And Gary also collects, interestingly enough, real life, weird and wonderful paranormal stories over at his My Haunted Life. That's his website. I'll put the link in the description again. And he hosts the Magical World of G. Michael Vasey podcast. And I thought Gary would be a perfect guest for my conversations with interesting people because I've had him on before talking about dowsing and earth energies. And this time I wanted to talk to him about some things that are very close to my own heart and my viewers as well. And that is the paranormal and Gary's life as a successful writer on these subjects. So, Gary, I have to say, you're a prolific writer. All those books, blogs, and Substacks. And I know that I wake up to a Substack most days from you in my inbox. And I don't know how you do it, but it's a wonderful gift that you've got. And it's very inspiring to someone like me, who's a first time author. So, I just want to start off by asking you how you find the time and what advice would you give to writers for knuckling down to get the words out there into a book?
Oh, it's definitely a sickness, I, everybody says to me, "How do you find the time?" And the answer is, I don't really know. It's a matter of where your interest lies, right? So I actually have my own company in a very obscure area of commodities, and I'm pretty well known globally for being an analyst and an expert on commodity trading risk management software. So that takes up a lot of my time and is my main income generator. But I just can't help myself. I'm constantly scribbling and out in the field dowsing or making videos. And it's an illness. I'm sick. I'm sorry. I don't have much of a social life. I'm single. I am a single parent as well. I have a 17-year-old daughter that lives with me. But now she's getting older, which gives me a bit more freedom. But no, I mean I just take after my own dad. My own dad was the same. I mean, he was just like constantly on the go, constantly doing things. And yeah, and I like being busy. I like thinking. I like being challenged. I like meeting people. But I'm not a group person. I don't like to be in big crowds. So I like the one-on-one stuff better.
Yeah. I think for myself with the writing, it's procrastination and the fear of sitting down and not having anything to say or how to get it
Mhm.
into form, some kind of sense without being too verbose about it. Because that first draft is always like a vomit across the screen or across the paper, isn't it?
Well, uh, you know, how can I say this? I don't think I'm a very good writer, right? I write for a living. I mean, my other job is constantly writing content for websites, blogs, white papers. I do nothing but write all day long, other than a bit of video stuff. And I always tell my clients, look, here's a draft of the article I just wrote. If you're going to edit it, please just make notes in the side column. Do not edit my work. And of course, the first two times they go edit it, and I can't. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept it. We have to go back to my original piece, and you have to do as I say. And here's the reason: I'm not a very good writer, but people know my writing style. So if all of a sudden I start writing really well, they're going to know that it's not me. And you don't want that because you want it to be my writing, my words. And I think that has taught me something. That and the criticism. You started before we started telling me about my novella, The Last Observer. If you go out and go out on Amazon, there's a couple of really, really horrible reviews, very critical. One by a college professor in California who teaches writing, and he basically just destroys the book, destroys me. And it was so cruel, and I was so taken aback because that was like only my second or third book. And then, everybody came out of the woodwork and said, well, has he ever written a book himself? No, he hasn't, because he can't and he don't, and you do. So, F him and carry on doing what you're doing. And I still was a bit worried when I got bad reviews and things. So, that's partly why sometimes you don't write, is you're worried it won't be very good. So I went and I looked at Shakespeare on Amazon. Shakespeare's got some pretty crappy reviews too. So if people can, one-star Shakespeare, why would I care? So to me, my attitude these days, maybe because I'm a bit older these days, is I don't really care. I do what I do. I like doing what I do. If you like it, great. If you don't, shut up.
Well, we're going to talk a bit about that novella later on in the chat, and I like it, and I loved the writing, and I'll go into that a bit more with you later. I thought it was very descriptive writing that brought you into the rooms that the characters were in, as though you were in there
Well,
watching
thanks.
from the
Yeah.
wall. So,
I mean, my advice to anybody who wants to write is just write and start writing for yourself. Don't worry about what other people are going to think. You'll always find an audience. I mean, I like Substack because I knock those things out in 30 seconds every morning or the night before. And I mean, I just put them out. I do read them, but occasionally I'd see typos and, things like that. And I'm thinking, God, I should do a better job of editing the stuff. But to me, Substack is like a spur of the moment, quick 10-minute write, something that's on my mind. And it can be anything, from weird, wonderful videos on YouTube to how I feel about the election of a president. And you never know what you're going to get. So that's why it's like the magical world of G. Michael Vasey.
yeah. Well, I enjoy them. I enjoy them. Sometimes I read them from the email, and sometimes I go over to the actual
Yeah.
website and read them from there. So, but have you noticed that it's always the people that criticize about the writing? There are people, those are the people that have never wrote a book,
Yeah,
never written a
never
book.
written a thing. I mean, this guy teaches, as far as I actually I emailed him back and forth for a while, and it was just a typical axe to grind person who's never written a word himself, don't write his first novel, teaches literature. And he told me that he goes out and he buys 99-cent books on Amazon, reads them and destroys them because they're all crap. And how dare you write? And I'm like, well, how dare you not write and then criticize other people for writing?
Yeah, what a sad little man and
Yeah,
what
what a
a
sad
sad
little man
life.
and a sad little life. Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
California too, yeah.
Right. Oh well. Too much sun, perhaps, maybe. So, moving on to the paranormal, I want to ask you, what is the most profound paranormal experience that you've ever had?
It's a toughie. I've had lots, but one of the ones that always sticks out in my mind is when I was doing my PhD research in Nova Scotia, and it was the first year I was out there. I had 6 weeks, and I'd rented a car, and the car didn't work, so they took it back and they gave me a Ford Mustang GT, and I was like, wow, Ford Mustang GT, what a car! So, and I'd only learned to drive like 6 months before. And out in Nova Scotia, once you get off the main road, the roads are just like gravel or mud. So I'm zooming down this gravel road doing, I don't know, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour in this Ford Mustang, radio with Bryan Adams on full blast. And I'm driving along, and all of a sudden, a voice from the back seat said to me, slow down. And I'm like, turn around, there's nobody there. My heart's pounding. I bang on the brakes. And again, the voice said again, slow down. So I bang on the brakes even more, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And it was at that moment I realized that I was approaching a hairpin bend with like a 500-meter drop. Had I not been warned by the voice, whatever the voice was, no more Gary.
Wow.
And that to me is profound because, who or what was the voice? Was it me in a different parallel universe? Was it my guardian angel? What the hell was going on there? And those kind of things really intrigued me. So I went out at the time and I did a whole bunch of research, and I found out that, of course, this is not an unusual phenomena. Voices do speak and warn people of impending doom and sort of change their lives. And it's, what's going on? Is it my guardian angel? Is it my inner self? Is it I don't know what it was, but that shook me up. I got out of the car. I was almost in tears. I mean, I was really shaking for quite a while, and I don't drive again because I just, the voice, and then obviously I realized that if I hadn't been for the voice, I probably would have been killed, and nobody would have found me for days, because I was in the middle of nowhere tapping at rocks as geologists do.
Wow, so somebody had your best interests at heart that day.
Something or somebody, yeah, absolutely.
I've had a similar experience, but it wasn't the voice. I mean, I've had the voice, but the experience that I'm going to relate to you was I actually got pulled back out of the road as I was about to step onto the road to an oncoming car.
Wow.
Um, I'd crossed the road at a silly angle. I'd gone behind a van and just
Hmm.
decided to, I was head full of magic. Off I went out into the road, and something or somebody pulled my hood and
Hmm.
yanked me back, and I fell over backwards, and a speeding car came past and there was
Yeah.
nobody around. I don't
See,
know what that
yeah,
was, and that
intervention.
was in the 90s, and I wouldn't have been here today if that hadn't have
Mm.
happened.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then, the other one, another one that was probably more scary, was basically growing up with poltergeist. And my parent, actually, funnily enough, it was the night before I was going to do my undergraduate field mapping project on the island of Egg, and I was going up alone to spend 6 weeks on this island doing geological mapping, just south of Skye there. And my parents were gone, and my uncle was going to pick me up in the morning, drive me to the train station in Hull, and I had my girlfriend over. And we were sat about 11:30 at night, and it all took off. Started hearing the banging and the crashing in the loft, and she was like, "What's that?" And I said, "Don't worry about it. It's just the friendly poltergeist." But I was obviously scared because I'd had lots of horrible experiences in the house that I grew up in. And sure enough, eventually we hear footsteps come down the staircase, the sighs and the groans that accompanied it, and then the door of the living room starts to slowly open. I mean, it doesn't sound very scary, but I think the pair of us freaked out completely. I couldn't sleep.
No, it is very scary.
Yeah,
Because I'm like you, I've experienced poltergeist activity,
yeah,
grew up with it as a young child.
yeah,
And when you see things opening and moving on their own, or the
yeah,
bed covers lifting off you ever so slowly, and there's nobody there doing
yeah.
it, it is scary.
Yeah,
It-
it was a bit like the movie because it started off quite fun, like, where's my keys? I put them on the window ledge. Where are my keys? And 2 hours later, you find them upstairs in the bathroom sink. So it's like, oh, that's funny, ha ha ha. But just like the Poltergeist movie, it got worse and worse and more scary to the point where I could barely sleep in that place. I was so pleased. At 18, I left to go to college in Birmingham, and I was so pleased to leave. I could not believe my luck at not having to spend any more time in that house.
Do you still have dreams about that place? Because I still have dreams about the spooky flat that I lived in growing up. I have dreams that I am an adult and I have to go back and move in there
Really?
because I'll be homeless if I don't. I have dreams like that.
No, I very rarely have scary dreams. I have very weird dreams at times. Like just recently, I think I wrote a Substack about it. Actually, it's happened again just 2 days ago. I told my daughter I woke up and talked to my daughter and went to the bathroom, and then I woke up.
Right? So a
So
dream within a dream, you mean?
yeah, so I woke up in a dream and then woke up really, and I'm like, hang on a minute. I've been up half an hour already. I've been talking to Denny. What the hell's going on? It's so vivid, so real. And that's happened a couple of three times in the last couple of months. The scary dream I have has no shape. There's nothing, there isn't any locale or any scary stuff. It's basically an unseen thing attacks me and throws me around in the darkness, and I can't fight back because I can't see it. And I guess that's some psychological meaning, isn't it? A feeling of powerlessness or something.
It's
I think one of the things that has happened to me is that in writing about ghost stories and paranormal and also doing the magical stuff, I won't say that I don't get scared, but it takes a lot more now than it used to get me frightened. And I think that a lot of these entities actually they're there to scare you because they want the fear energy to feed on. That's their sustenance. And because I no longer give them that fear energy, they leave me alone. I think that's my theory. And I think, I've written about this in some of my books. I wrote a book on poltergeist, I wrote a book on black-eyed kids, and I wrote a book on sleep. Uh, oh gosh, the old hag syndrome. Yeah,
Sleep paralysis, yeah.
sleep paralysis. Thank you. And I'm convinced that a lot of these entities are very real. They operate within the same space, but on a different frequency to us. And they're aware of us, just as we're occasionally aware of them. And they can use our fear and anger and sometimes sexual desire, I suppose, as a form of food or energy for them. And this is what I covered in my book, Liminal People, actually. And so my advice to anybody is if something does happen, try not to be frightened. My dad used to tell me get angry, and although that can be self-defeating, I did find it worked momentarily because when that door was opening, my girlfriend and I were scared. I eventually got up and sort of ran at the door screaming, F, F, F in anger, and that stopped the whole thing. It stopped altogether. So anger does sometimes work. But these days, I'm not, I've read so many stories and I sit up all evening. Once I've finished doing what I'm doing and I'm just relaxing, I don't watch TV. I sit on YouTube and I watch, all the paranormal shows and all the scary stuff. Um, Whatever it is, it can be uh, ghosts and ghoulies, it can be poltergeist, or it can be, strange creatures, crypto, that kind of thing. That's what I do. And so my daughter comes in and she's, Dad, turn it down. How do you sleep after watching these programs? I think I could care less. I mean, I collect the stories, so it's kind of, I mean, I hate to use the expression, but I've inoculated myself to a large degree, I think.
Yeah, I'm the same. I watch all those programs or I listen to the spooky podcasts. In fact, I was
Yeah.
listening to one of yours over the weekend,
Uh-huh.
which is I'll talk to you a little bit about it. It was about the black-eyed kids.
Yeah.
And it was yesterday and it was getting dark and it was very foggy outside. And I looked out the window and it looked like the cover from the Exorcist film, the foggy cover where the priest is stood under the lamppost because the lamppost was shining down on the garden. And then I had you talking about the black-eyed kids and it was like spooky as anything. Loved it.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you collect these stories, you collate these stories for your
Yeah.
books, and you've got a few
Yeah.
books that has lots of people's experiences in, and a website as well where people can go and submit experience.
Right. So
So,
I set up the website deliberately to get those stories, and back 15 years ago, what was it, 15, maybe even longer. Actually, yeah, more like 20 years ago when I set up the website originally, those kind of websites really got traffic, and I got at least two or three stories every day. Now, of course, it's one every 3 months because unfortunately people tend to visit like social media and Reddit and places like that and share stories there. So I kind of it's lost its usefulness, but I keep it there because I occasionally do get stories. And the way I use it is just occasionally you get a story that's really intriguing and it gives you an idea to do further research. That's how I wrote about the black-eyed kids. I'd never heard of the black-eyed kids. And someone sent this story and I was like, wow. You know when when you're relatively inoculated, so you read all this stuff and you watch all this stuff and it's like water off a duck's back, and then there's one thing where you feel that cold, icy chill going up your spine. You think, ooh, that's what this story did. So I thought, wow, must investigate the black-eyed kids. I ended up writing a really best-selling book on black-eyed kids as a result. And this is where I started, going beyond just the story and sort of, well, what's behind, what is this black-eyed kid thing? Is it a mass hallucination or is it real? And if it's real, what on earth is it? And I have come, my conclusion is black-eyed kids are either demonic, but by that I mean a lower vibrational being that feed off our fear, like a shadow person, essentially. And they do this to feed off our fear. It's as simple as that. We're just, sustenance for them, I think.
I think they also have a slight vampiric aspect to them as well,
Or they
because
take
they
your
can't come
energy,
over
and
the
that
threshold, can they, unless you say
correct.
no.
And that's the thing is don't let them in. I mean, if they do knock on your door, don't let them in. But there is a weird cultural side to the story as well, which I also discuss in the book, which is that if you if you do the research and you look at the stories, there's a very typical sort of modus operandi where they knock on your door, blah, blah, blah. But that's very much an American experience. In the UK, the black-eyed kids are normally ghosts in forests and that kind of thing. They're not knocking on your door. And I also came across stories from New Zealand, Australia, places like that, and even the American, indigenous American Indians. And the modus operandi is different depending on the culture. And it even goes to so far as an American living in the UK had a black-eyed kid encounter, which was the typical knocking on the door of young kids, which nobody in the I couldn't find any stories in the UK that I trusted and believed that were that way, set up that way. So it's almost like it's a culture. There's a cultural aspect to how they approach you, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, almost like in mythology or even with the fairies, where as time goes on, they appear to people in a different way, something that
Yeah,
would be familiar to them. A bit like
yeah,
the Sandown clown as well, who appeared to the
yeah.
children as the clown that he actually looked like the clown from the BBC 1970s test card.
Yeah.
So they appear, and I think these entities, these black-eyed kids, they play on that human emotion of what, you mother children, you see a child that's in need, your first instinct is to help that child.
Yeah.
So, and they appear in a way that would be most familiar to you. So with the Americans and Halloween and knocking on the door and trick or treat and all that, they knock on
Yeah.
the door and they come, can I use your phone? I
Yeah.
need to phone my parents. It's always playing on the emotion.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think
And the classic one that I covered was, can I use your telegraph?
your telegraph.
Yeah, that young kids knocking on a door somewhere in the US. Can I use your telegraph? So plainly they were getting the time period slightly off.
Yeah, not been briefed properly. Have you ever come across a story where somebody's let them in? I haven't.
Yeah, one or two. And it wasn't if it were to be believed, it wasn't wonderful. The pets all died in about 2 weeks, and the husband developed terminal cancer, and the wife had some other illness, and it wasn't good. I mean, they were sucked dry of energy, and somehow that left them vulnerable to disease and so on. Which, yeah, I mean, I guess if you think about it, is sort of obvious, really, that if you have your life energy sucked away, then you become less able to fight off anything that's going on internally, and so it's an opportunity for those things to develop. So yeah, both stories where they let them in, sickness and disaster followed. Yeah,
That's very parasitic.
yeah, very vampire-like, as you said. Yeah, and I was fascinated with them for a while, but after I'm not so fascinated by them anymore. I watch a lot of the shows, and I swear now that I can tell the difference between something that's made up and something that's real, just by that feeling that you get when you see something real. And there's a true sort of cold terror that you feel here somewhere.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, God, that's real, that's real. Whereas most of the time, like, oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
You, you're getting views on TikTok by, having your girlfriend pretend to be, the woman from the Blair Witch Project or something. It's a lot of it's fake, but the ones that are true, they're the ones where, you think, God, if that happened to me, God, I wouldn't like that at all.
Yeah, they're the stories that leave you looking be over your shoulder or not
Yeah.
really wanting to get up and
Yeah.
put the light off and think, making you feel very uncomfortable. Yeah, because there's a lot of creepy pasta out there online, and I think it's diluted a lot of true experiences because not a lot of people would believe it now because there's so much fakeness, but it's good that you can feel the coldness, the creepiness, or the just you just know when something is genuine or not.
Well, to be honest, these days, I think humans scare me more. I mean, I watch a lot of camping, camping video because I'm an avid camper and love hiking and camping. And I watch a lot of videos about strange things that happen to people camping. And a lot of that's nonsense as well. It's just made up garbage. But the ones that are really the scary ones are when it's a human person that's involved in behaving strangely, in the woods. You know, why is there a woman walking around the woods at 4 a.m. in the morning with no flashlight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what the hell?
When
That to me is much more scary and bizarre than
when I was
anything
younger,
else.
that's how my parents used to comfort me, believe it or not. When I was seeing spirit and ghosts, they'd say to me, it's not the dead you need to be afraid of, it's the
Yeah,
living. And
absolutely.
yeah, and it's true. It's very, very true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I mean, I would encourage you to write and you know, just do it. Be yourself and be brave and just slap it down and get someone else to review it for you, maybe, and that's it. I
Yeah,
don't even bother with that anymore. I just write it and edit it myself and put it out.
put it out and not let the naysayers or the other
Well,
people that make do it for a living try and put you down.
here's another thing, right? I've had some books that sold thousands and thousands and thousands of copies, and I've had other books that I thought, like the novel, The Last Observer, that I really put a lot of effort into, really thought was good, and I was convinced would take off. Now, if the Last Observer sold 400 copies, I think that would be, an over-exaggeration. And to this day, I cannot figure out what makes a book sell and what, why some books sell, why some books don't. And the books that I really felt like I slapped together, those are the ones that sell. The ones that I really take a lot of time over and try to be really, have them edited by somebody and a proper cover. Nah, those are the ones that die a death. So, you know, I wouldn't I wouldn't sweat too much. You do it for you. And if other people find it interesting and you make a bit of money off it, so much the better, right? That's the way I
Absolutely.
view it.
Right, I want to talk to you about your fantasy novel, The Last Observer, which I'm
Mhm.
currently reading, very nearly finished it. Didn't want to put it down. In fact, I got 70% through it in the first sitting, and I'm going to finish it off later today. And it's an occult fantasy adventure, and it's described as similar to a modern Dennis Wheatley novel, and it is very similar to a modern Dennis Wheatley novel. Now, I spotted a few familiar things in there. I
Yeah,
spotted a little bit of inspiration from The Devil Rides Out, and a little
yes,
bit of
maybe.
inspiration from what's it called? The one about the magic on the astral plane.
The Car of Gifford Hillary.
No, the one in World War Two.
Oh yeah. I
Second
forget.
conflict, something conflict,
Strange Conflict or something like
strange
that. Yeah.
conflict. That's
Yeah.
right. And I also recognized a lot of traits in the protagonist,
Oh
Stanley.
really?
And I'm sitting here now talking with him. And yes, I thought, well, this guy is very familiar to me, and I thought, I wonder if he's based certain aspects of his personality on himself because this could be Gary Vasey, this guy. And then you sealed the deal when you started talking about the lady Alice, was it not Alice, the other lady, Joe,
Mhm.
and he fell in love with her and she reminded him of a dream that he used to have when he was a younger
Mhm.
lad about this
Well,
this
I mean, when you're trying to make something up like that, you use a lot of personal stuff. I mean, also, I think there's a bit of St Rudolf Steiner in there. There's a bit of um, Frabato the Magician by Franz Barden. There's a lot of Barden-esque magic in there as well. That really and Barden really influenced me in the magical side. But like a lot of people. And when you guys talked about The Devil Rides Out, I mean, to me, that was the movie that turned my life because I watched it New Year's Eve when I was about 15 years old at my uncle's house. And I'm like, I was scared, but I thought, this is for me. That's what I want to do. I want to be in Magic. And so that's when I really started reading all the books. And I mean, I would avidly read anything I could lay my hands on. And back then you had to work hard to find some of these books, right? And back in the 70s and early 80s. And luckily for me, I made friends with a group of older people. And I think it was the Church for Psychical and Spiritual Research or something. So I was going along as like a 15, 16-year-old with my parents' permission, and everybody was over the age of 55. And there was a little old lady called Mrs. Marsden that lived pretty close to us. So she would invite me over for coffee and biscuits and allow me to help myself to a book library. And I'm convinced that that's where I first came across things like Frabato the Magician and some of that deep magical stuff. So I worked it all in, but the idea, and maybe some people criticize it. It's too black and white. It's too good and evil. But really, I was trying to make it magically accurate in so far as I could, and fast moving, fast paced. And I was trying to make a point. And the point is that magic is all about the use of the imagination and the ability to visualize and the ability to use that power of imagination. And that's what I was trying to really get people interested in, was being imaginative. And yeah, unfortunately, not many people have read it.
Well,
Um,
I'm going to
and
push this book because it needs reading, especially in these times. Talking about when you brought the quantum physics into it and how
yeah,
reality is viewed through the lens of quantum physics and
yeah.
how we use magic and how quantum physics explains magic.
Quite a few years ago, when I was doing the SOL course, I got interested in, well, I was always interested in science, so the quantum stuff really got interested in. And I just started to see the parallels between, people will say, oh, you're a hard-nosed scientist. How can you be interested in magic? Well, I mean, magic is something that's real and it needs to be explained. And there is a scientific mechanism that can partially explain quite a lot of the phenomena, and that's quantum physics. So, I was fascinated at the time by things like Schrodinger's cat and the double split, single split, double split, and all that experiment and all that nonsense. So I worked all that in, and it became like the plot, the subplot, is that science was removing the need for imagination.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had an interesting synchronicity with your book because the day before I started reading it, I was reading a book about consciousness and I'd
right.
read about the double slit experiment and
Yeah,
Schrodinger's cat and about how is it the protons, they can act as waves or they can act
yeah,
as
waves or particles,
particles
and
depending on whether they're being observed or not. And then when it came up in the book, I thought, oh, what a coincidence or what a synchronicity. We must be onto something here. For me to read about that yesterday and then to find it in your
yeah. How
novella.
did you find my book anyway? I'm amazed that you read that.
Because believe it or not, I am very interested in your work and I've got that book and I've got the liminal people
All
and
right.
I have a few. So yes. And I'm going
Okay.
to actually going to review this novella for Hocus Pocus because it's very,
Right.
very apt for the times that we're in, where you've got this black
Well,
magic
wait until you
logic.
read the prequel, assuming that you're interested in. I mean, I wrote The Last Observer, and it was actually published by a proper book publishing
Yeah,
company. So, you know, I I was so disappointed. That's why I'm self-published. There's just no point in having a publisher involved. They don't do anything, and they just take everything, all the money. So, and not that there's much money, but they take most of that. And so it was always meant to be part of a trilogy. And the second part is actually the prequel, and it's it's basically about Edward. I'll say nothing more.
right.
But it also is, I think you would resonate with the theme of the book as well, particularly now that things like Epstein and the Diddy parties are all the news. It's almost like I was previewing that for readers.
Absolutely, because the first book is talking about the Black Magic Lodge that is trying to change our current reality for their own
Yes.
gain. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, that is so poignant for the
They're
times that we're
trying to
in now.
kill, they're trying to kill off anybody with magical ability or anybody with strong imaginative faculties in order to take control of reality. So it's exactly what's happened this last few years in the sense of the narrative and trying to control people into a single narrative and not tolerate any and not tolerate spirituality and not tolerate belief in God and all this kind of stuff. So I guess in a way I was seeing that coming, but the prequel is I don't want to spoil it if people want to read it, but I've got to tell you that the prequel I self-published. It has a wonderful cover, and people have told me they won't buy the book because the cover's too scary. And I think it sold 22 copies, but it's better. It's better, trust me, than The Last Observer.
What's it called?
Do you know I'm having a difficulty trying to remember what the book's called?
Yeah, I'm the same. Whenever the camera's on, my mind goes blank. Yeah, I will find
Um,
it and because I'll be buying it and I'll
I'll
put the
shoot you an
link in
email
the.
afterwards with the title and stuff. But I'd recommend both. I mean, you must read The Last Observer first, otherwise the second one doesn't really you've lost the pretext for reading the prequel. And then I was going to write a third one which dealt with sort of the after effects of the people, Stanley, etc., and what they do. But there was I mean, you sell 400 and then 20, and you think, oh well, I'm writing for myself at this point, so let's not bother.
But it's such a good book, and the first one, just going back to it, the way it was written, it was very, very descriptive, even down to him making a cup of tea in his mug, in his old mug, and
Well,
him
because
saying, "My tea is never as good as the tea that I imagine." And
yeah,
then you
yeah,
think, do you know what? He's right. He's bloody right. And it takes you right into the room with him. And when he goes to the pub and he meets the strange, mysterious stranger, and
yeah,
first of all, he gets caught with the NPC in the pub who likes to make small talk and he's
yeah,
ridiculing him because he likes books and he likes to go
yeah,
off in his imagination. And it's like you're sat at the table or the next
yeah,
table listening to them thinking, I wish I was
right,
part of that conversation. I want to be
yeah.
part of this conversation. It was very, very descriptive and I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I really did try to write a good book, and as I
You
say, I
did?
was very disappointed with the friends and family read it, and a lot of people said it. It's got good reviews amongst the ones from the professor and a couple of his students. It got some good reviews, but it never really took off. It's a shame, but I think sometimes I think when you write stuff, people that need to find it.
Absolutely, they do. They do. And I think a lot of people on this, viewers of this channel or Thomas Sheridan's channel or your own channel, they need to read this book because it is very, very apt to the times that we're living in today. And it was written in when was it?
Yeah.
2013? You wrote that.
Yeah, yeah. That one was, yeah, absolutely. 2013, yeah.
So you definitely tapped into some stream of consciousness that was
Yeah.
foretelling what was coming down the line.
Well, I mean, all my life I've had this sense of, and I don't want this to sound anyway special or weird, but I've had a sense of destiny in not that I'm going to play any kind of a role, but in a sense that I'm living in a special time. And I think, sometimes when I read Thomas's posts on Facebook or watch his videos where he says, he almost says we're privileged to be alive. And I think that's right, because I think those of us that are properly alive are, we've been challenged and we've been found to be strong enough to get through it without falling into the trap, right? And I think that was that's why we're alive now. It's a spiritual lesson, and we've been so far, we've been quite good at, taking that on board and succeeding with it. But it does make it difficult to get along with a lot of people because you start to see the world in a completely different way, and to them it's like, what the hell are you talking about?
Well, to quote your book, they are the sleepers, aren't they?
Yeah, they're the sleepers. Yeah, they're sleeping peacefully through it all, unaware. I was on Facebook today. I did put cross post it, and I read. I think it's some Czech musician, and he writes in English this long diatribe about Trump and how democracy is being used for fascism. And I have to tell you that, and it got lots of shares and lots of likes. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, now either the person that wrote this has the mental age of 14, or they're a member of the Czech Communist Party, because the very idea that suppressing the forces that want to suppress alternative views, misinformation, so-called, is fascism is nutty. I mean, it's like, hang on a minute. How could you possibly suggest that people shouldn't be allowed to express their opinions and have all kinds of crazy hypotheses? How do you think science works? It works by crazy people having crazy ideas and spend, you know, I just posted, I wrote a Substack on Erwin Zodro, a Canadian paleontologist that took me under his wing. And what a crazy old bird he was. But he found all kinds of stuff and came up with all kinds of theories that only a person like that could. That's now mainstream science. So it's not just about social engineering. It's about the future of bloody humanity. It's how we think, how we behave, how we improve ourselves. So I mean, when I wrote the book, I was trying to draw parallels between science, magic. I was trying to point out that imagination is one of the most critical faculties that we have that make us human. If you don't have an imagination, you really are sleeping. I mean, to me, I when I was a young kid, I used to walk home from school and I had quite the hike. And I used to walk home from school in Willoughby outside of Hull, and I used to start singing a song in my head. At the time, it might have been something like Jeepster by T-Rex or Slade or Susie Quattro or something like that. By the time I got home, I had it so down pat, I could hear every instrument in surround sound in real time in my head, quadraphonic. And that's imagination. That's being able to really create reality. Create a reality for yourself out of pure imagination. Whether that's hearing, visualization, hearing that doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. And that's how magic works. I mean, everybody goes witters on about the secret and cosmic ordering and all this nonsense, which is all materialistic, selfish, narcissistic drivel. It's basically simple. If you want something, assume it's already happened and act like it has happened, and it will. If you change your own reality inside, then the outside changes as well. It's as simple as that. That's all magic is.
Yeah, that's true. And in the book, that's why the Black Magician wanted to take everybody's imagination away, because if you've got no
Yes.
imagination, then you're just going along with the reality that
Yeah,
you're given and you don't make
exactly.
any steps to change
Then you
anything.
live in a controlled world and you have no future, no past, no destiny, no point in living.
You don't even, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good book. I'm going to put the link in the description. I'm going to review it for a
Thanks.
future Hocus Focus, and I'm going
Cool.
to find the sequel, which is really the prequel. And I'm
Yeah.
really going to ask you now, Gary, please, will you write the third part of the trilogy?
Well, I might.
Go on,
If a few people buy the book and show interest, then I probably will. But
because it needs
yeah,
finishing. It does. It's great.
yeah,
It's a
yeah, yeah.
gem, and I'm really sorry that it's not been seen. It's maybe now's the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting the way you've seen the re I've not really thought about it that way, but you're completely correct. It is like, yeah, absolutely. It's like a parallel for what's happened and what is happening. Particularly when you read the prequel, and you see how they try to trap this individual, and yeah. Diddy parties.
Diddy parties. Well, the bit that I'm up to on the first book is, like I said, I'm about 70% of the way through. We just had the main magical ritual with the Black Magician, and I won't go into what happened there,
No,
but
because there's
somebody's
a
very
twist.
disillusioned.
There's a twist at the end that comes as a big shock, I think. And
Right.
that's why I can't tell you much about the prequel because, and that's why I say don't read that first because it would ruin the shock, if you see what I'm saying.
Well,
It
if
seems to
people
already
watching
move.
like Dennis Wheatley, they're going to love this. So
Yeah,
he's
that's what a
brilliant.
lot of people said.
Yeah.
But like I say, I was pretty disappointed. And then I decided, well, in that case, I'm just going to stick to my knitting and do the ghost books. But as you probably realize, in recent years, I've done more magic, personal development, personal storytelling. And I think I will. I think I've probably got a couple more ghost story compilations to come, and then I'm done with that genre because you can only do so much. And I think I've covered most of it, and I'm going to stick to more of the personal magical journey. I mean, the books chasing books, chasing the goddess, I think is another really strong piece of work. And the reason for that is because I decided to spend 3 months being the goddess of winter, the Slavic goddess of winter, and 3 months being the Slavic goddess of spring. And I did the 3 winter moons and the 3 spring moons, and I did the Slavic ritual around Marana at the end of winter. And I made such a connection with the goddess of death. And people look at me and that's what the book is about. It's about basically doing these meditations and people say to me, but how could you do that? How, goddess of death. And I'm like, yeah, goddess of death and rebirth. I mean, you know, I learned so much, even like, how do you find light in the darkness? You know, and I learned so much from this Slavic goddess of death and winter. So I put it in that book, and it's the last in the series of the Chasing series. And again, it hasn't sold many copies, but I think, if you're interested in magic and you're interested in hearing somebody's story of how they stumble into magical experience, then it's probably worth a read too, to be honest. Even though it's my own book and I'm pushing it, but
And just,
people should be aware of these
yeah,
books, but they're not.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What was it that drew you into the occult and magic? Was it your paranormal experiences as a child that put
With
you on that
paranormal
path, or
experiences, it was watching The Devil Rides Out. The Devil Rides Out really blew my mind. But it was also, the Church of the Mrs. Marsden, I think her name was, at the Church for Spiritual and Psychical Studies, and now she took me under a wing and lent me a book library. And I would do things like I've done a video on my channel of cloud busting, which actually has been a slow burner. It's got quite a lot of views and still gets a lot of views. But when I was 15 at school, I would sit in a math lesson or something, be a window cleaner outside. And I'd sit there and I'd make the window cleaner look at me, or I'd make the window cleaner do something. I'd visualize them doing it and doing it and doing it, and then they would.
yes,
So
I've
I
done
was like,
that on the bus.
yeah,
On the
just
bus.
just for something to do because the math lesson was boring. And so I guess, magic is a really important part of my life. But I'm not one of these people that gets up and that dresses up and does all the Latin, and I'm very much a sort of practitioner. And I love Thomas's take on magic. I think there's a lot of great value in some of the stuff he says, and I'm particularly taken by his charisma ideas. I think there's some real truth in that. And in fact, I'd like to talk to Thomas about that some more one of these days.
Yeah, it is an interesting subject, and it's
Yeah,
building your charisma. Very,
yeah,
very
yeah,
useful thing to do as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I say, the lesson for anybody like yourself that wants to do a bit more writing is just get on with what gives you fun, what you enjoy, and I enjoy doing that, and I get a kick out of it. The sense of disappointment is never the bad reviews or stuff. It's just that you think you wrote something that maybe people would find useful, and it doesn't get the attention that you wanted it to. But I still go back to the idea that I think people find what they need. So someone somewhere will read the book and go, gosh, this is just what I needed to hear today.
That
And
was
that's
me.
all you can do. Yeah.
That was me. That was me because it was a real wow moment. Yeah, it really was. It's a fabulous book, Gary. I loved it, and I
Well,
am going
thanks.
to review it for Hocus Focus, and I want everybody who's watching to go to the link and have a look and buy that book and read it. It's brilliant.
Thanks.
Like Magic, you'll love it. If you love Dennis
I
Wheatley,
get,
you'll love the
I'm
book.
getting awfully embarrassed and hot here. Shh.
No, don't hide your light under a bushel. So, if you could learn the truth about any occult mystery or magical secret, which one would it be?
Oh, well, I mean, I think as a little boy and even today, I still sit and wonder what's the whole point, what's the purpose, what's the end game, and what's it all about? And I think I'd love to have that question answered.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
I'm not sure that I will ever have that question answered in the way that I expect. But you know, I've always been. I can remember sitting as a little boy between the front room and the back room in a two up, two down house in a terrace in West Hull, and I can see the old-fashioned radio and the television box with its curtains and the cacti on the sort of bent thin stick type arrangement stand. And I just blow my mind thinking, who am I? What am I? Why am I here? And that was the time when, and I've told this story many times before, so I won't go into too much detail, but I had that strong impression that I was sitting in a room attached to a machine, experiencing a life as like entertainment. And it's almost like I lifted up in the air and I saw room after little room after little room after little room with all these people sitting connected to this machine. And this was 1960 something. It wasn't, after the Matrix movie. It was a long, long time ago. And at that point, it struck me that this could be a reality within a reality within a reality, and I would never know it. And maybe this is my vacation that I just, paid a fortune for, and I'm enjoying my vacation. So
well,
I'd like to know, I'd like to know what it's really all about. Um, I've got some ideas, but
yeah,
uh,
you'd like
I'd
them
like to,
confirming.
sure, yeah, that would be the $6 million question.
Have you got any new projects in the pipeline, or are you busy focusing on your dowsing work?
Um, I've got a couple. I think I've got a couple of ghost story books coming together, and like I said, that'll be it. And I'm also wanting to work on a recounting of the Templar alignment across the Czech Republic. The problem I have with that is I'm a geologist and I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So if I've got like 2 points on an alignment and they're 60 kilometers apart, I feel the need to actually go in and fill in the detail between the points. I'm worried I'll never actually get to write the book because I'll constantly be revisiting. And literally, I've walked thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers and driven thousands of kilometers tracking this thing. But I go out pretty much every weekend and do some stuff, and um, I think that's probably. I think that behind the dowsing, there's something else, and I think that will take shape eventually as well, as some form of a book. And it's like subconsciously, we know everything already. I probably know the answer to my own question, and I quite often, I just sometimes I pick up my dowsing rod and I use it to ask questions. You know, let's think. Is my daughter okay? Yes, she is. Okay. Stuff like that. And this absolutely works with almost 100% accuracy, unless it's something I'm personally and emotionally attached to. Like, am I going to meet a nice woman? It's never going to tell me the answer because I want an answer too bad that I can't get the actual natural reaction, right? But for normal divination of what's going to happen, I use my dowsing rod. I use it for almost everything now. And
Yeah.
the only explanation is I already know the answer. Somewhere deep down inside, I already know everything.
One of the theories for for the rods or for the pendulum is that it's the subconscious that's telling us and
Yeah,
moving it because it's the subconscious that
yeah,
knows.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's a bigger side to the dowsing stuff. I'm convinced, as along with Rory, that Rory Duff, who's another dowser, another geologist as well, is right that where these important lines come together, cross, and where the major Earth energies are, they enhance the magical experience. They enhance the ability to perform imaginative magic. And I'd really like to get some people here in the Czech Republic interested in working at some of these locations. The problem is that my Czech isn't good enough, and I don't really know how to connect with that community here, which is a shame, you know. But I'll solve that problem eventually, I'm sure.
Well, this is a great place to end it, Gary. So
Yep,
please, can you tell everyone where they can find you, where they can buy your books, listen to your
sure.
podcast, and all the other wonderful content that you've made and put out there?
Well, you can find me at garymvasey.com. You can find me on Substack. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on YouTube. But basically, garymvasey.com. If you go there, you'll find it, all the links and everything. And yeah, and all the books are all on Amazon. I write under the name G. Michael Vasey. So just put G. Michael Vasey and you'll find me.
And I'll put the links in the
Yeah,
description box as well
cheers.
to make it easy. So, Gary, thank you for coming on and
No
for giving
problem.
up your time for this. It's
No,
been an
no problem.
absolute pleasure to talk with you again.
Yeah,
And
it's
if you
been fun.
enjoyed,
It's been fun. I enjoyed it. Yeah,
it
and
has
thank you for
exploded.
having me. I mean, it's a pleasure.
And everybody out there, if you've enjoyed Gary's talk today, please go and subscribe to his YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, please give this video a like and the channel Wuthering Nights a subscribe. And we will see you next time on the next episode.
Ginger fairies.